Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. So good to see you all. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give everybody a minute just to get connected. It's so good. We have a large group that I think is going to be joining us today. I am so excited because this is a very important conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and get started first by doing just a bit of housekeeping. So first and foremost, let me introduce myself. I'm Anissa Mitchell and I'm with PMD Alliance, and I'm very happy to have all of you with us today. We are going to allow you all to ask questions and interact with the speakers as we have our discussion today. So I want to point out some ways for you to do this. First of all, if you want to open up your chat box, that's one way that you would be able to chat a question with us. We're also going to give you an opportunity to unmute yourself after we get started if you have a question. The best way for you to let us know that you want to ask a question is for you to raise your hand. Not so much physically, because we have a lot of people here and I can't see you all, and our tech support can't see you all, Kelly and Julie. But if you would use your reactions at the bottom and click on that and just do the hand up or the thumb up to let us know that you want to raise your hand and ask a question, then we'll know to call on you. Also, you can just chat a question, say, hey, Anissa, I want to ask a question, and then I'll call on you. You may see at the bottom of your screen right now that we have transcription coming up. So if you like that and it's helpful, you don't have to do anything. But if you would like to remove that, click the button where it says hide subtitles, which is either under the live transcription button, or if you've already opened up your chat, you click the more button with the little 3 dots. It'll pop up a box. It'll say hide subtitles, so you can do that. So feel free to interact with us throughout the day. So today's program is a little bit different. It's a little bit longer than our typical because we're going to be doing some breakout sessions towards the end of the program. We're going to spend the first hour doing a discussion. So today we're going to be talking about something that we all should be doing, and yet many of us find that we're not doing. We let time slip away, and we haven't done that, and that's planning for the future. So this is the first in a series of the art and practice of planning, and today we're going to be talking specifically about planning for the future. So we're going to invite you to ask your questions throughout. Again, we're going to do a breakout session at the end of the discussion for about 15 minutes. So you will automatically be sent to a breakout room. You won't have to do anything. There'll be several people in there with you, and you guys can choose who to kind of represent you, but we'll give you a question right before you go in for you to discuss. And then when you come back, we'll pick 3 or 4 people to maybe do a share back with us and let us know what they discussed in there. If you registered in time to get an email letting you know, here's your registration link if you want to join, there was some handouts that was included. Hopefully you were able to get those and download them. If not, after today's program, you will get another email. They will be added to that email, but they should be this. So one looks like this, and it is the Caregiver Action Plan. And what we want for you to use this, or how we want you to use this, is to write things down to yourself that you know you need to work on. So part of the problem is having an idea that you need to do something, but then not even following through with it. So this helps you to identify what it is you need to do, who you need to contact in order to make that happen, and setting yourself a time frame in order to complete it. If you give yourself a deadline or a goal, you're more likely to complete that. So that's one of your handouts. The other handout, it looks like this. And again, if you didn't get them, we're going to make them available to you after the program. You won't necessarily need them for the program, but this one is more of a reference. So you'll see on this document that there's just some information about types of caregiving services that are available, what you should be considering if you're planning for the future, what advanced directives there are, what estate planning documents you might be considering, and we will be getting into that in more depth with our speakers today, long-term care placement options, and how to do a plan. Again, it's not exhaustive, but it's a nice starting point. All right. So I want to introduce our two speakers with us today. First is Amy O'Rourke. And some of you might have seen Amy. She's been on our programs before. She's the founder of what was the Cameron Group, Aging Life Care Services, located here in Orlando. She's another Floridian like me. She has a master's in public health and a master's certification in gerontology. And she's a licensed nursing home administrator, a certified care manager with over 30 years of healthcare experience, with 23 specifically in the field of aging. She's very active with the Aging Life Care Association, and she's served in the Florida chapter for many, many years. And she is releasing a book. It's actually dropping this month, and you can pre-order it, called The Fragile Years, which is going to be full of really good and helpful information. So we're glad to have Amy with us. And then joining us with Amy is Beth Smith, and she is a practicing attorney in elder law for more than 25 years in Tucson. She's with Duffield, Adamson, and Hellenbold. Hopefully I'm saying this right. Since 2012, she's been a partner. And she's a regular presenter on guardianship, estate planning, and end-of-life issues. So we're happy to have Beth with us today. It's nice having you ladies. So first of all, I want to thank Kyowa Kirin because they're a partner with us in these 4 series of this program, and they did a study. So this study is kind of what's framing some of this information. They did a study of 695 care partners, which is a pretty large number, and found that 33% of those care partners had not put any much thought into planning. No really thought into planning for the future, and 39% didn't set any kind of goals or expectations, which is why we are having this discussion today. So before we launch into this, we have a quick poll that we want to get an idea of the audience with us today. How many of you have done some kind of planning? So what's your current advanced planning situation? So I'll give you guys a minute to answer that. All right. Have some, looks like the largest numbers so far is they've done some planning. All right, we have like 74% if I've done some planning. It's still moving. Looks like we have around 16% have all of their plans made. So good for you, 16%. 7% does not know where to start. And 3%, I haven't even thought about it. Some people are even saying 0. Not done anything. So I think that you are in the right place. And that is the reason why we are having this discussion today. So let's start off, ladies. Why is this a problem for people? Why they should put some thought into planning?
Well, you should start. First of all, Beth, I'm sorry, I'm gonna steal the stage for a minute. I love this group. This is like the best kept secret nationally. It's like a little private community for all of you to come and learn. And I love that it's been created and nurtured as a community. So I'm always privileged to come and share whatever I know with you to be of service. So what I think about, I had a couple that I worked with years ago. They were in their late 60s. He had Parkinson's. She was the care partner. And he fell. You've all heard this story before. And what happened? He did break a bone in the hospital. And they wanted to proceed with surgery. And she had no proof that she was his decision maker. And she said, as you all can imagine, I'm his wife. I'm his wife. We're married. And the hospital said, it literally makes no difference. And she called me and we figured out a way through it, but it was very stressful, very unsure as to whether the kind of surgery that he was going to have was going to be what he would want. And as you all know, and maybe you don't know, hospitals do the most extreme action in the absence of a decision maker. So they will do everything. They don't do nothing. They do everything if there's no decision maker. And that's completely avoidable. So I'm looking at the poll and I'm thinking, I've done some planning, 74%. Now, you could feel really, really good about that. Or you could be like me, and I'm going to turn this over to Beth because you've seen this happen 100 times. People have their documents, but they haven't been signed. You haven't gone into the lawyer's office and you haven't done the signature. You've got your trust set up, but nothing's in it. So Beth, I'll throw it over to you to continue with what you know about this topic.
All right. And basically I'll keep it brief. This is something that could take up the whole hour all by itself. But with regard to healthcare decision-making, you'll hear the term advanced directives, healthcare power of attorney, living will, mental health care power of attorney. You know, there are a lot of documents out there, but basically anything that you put in writing, you know, there are statutes in each state that sort of govern what's a validly executed document, but you know, whatever you put in writing will be greatly respected by healthcare providers, and if the time comes, in court. Part of my practice for 25 years has been doing guardianship and conservatorship, which is not fun for the ward, you know, for the person who may be incapacitated, and a nightmare for the family, and lawyers get paid too much for doing it. Just by, you know, a program like this, figuring out how you can do your advanced directives in writing, validly executed, that information we can provide some here. You'll also hear later in the program other ways in your communities that you can find that. The best place to start is an attorney. The Bar Association can provide you names of attorneys. Your local bar association, either county or state bar association, can provide you those names. You can Google them. But a healthcare power of attorney names an agent. This is a person who can, you know, stand in your shoes and make decisions as you would have them made if you could communicate them. In my state, a healthcare power of attorney is also needed, believe it or not, if someone wants to make an appointment with a doctor for somebody else. Most doctors require that you have a written healthcare power of attorney naming an agent who can do that, make appointments, get medical records, visit you. I have wives who were not named powers of attorney, and they could not visit their husband, I'm sure either spouse, but could not visit their husbands during the pandemic. They were not decision makers, as Amy pointed out. Many people have done living wills. This is your personal declaration that you do not want to be kept alive on machines. It's great. It's important that you have that in writing. It's not what people need when you go to the hospital and get a pacemaker put in or something. I mean, it's a healthcare power of attorney names an agent. And then, you know, I like to put those two documents together so that people take the same, you know, take one document to the hospital or provide it to their doctors. We also can talk a little bit about, you know, what happens with your money. Again, powers of attorney, putting things in place, notifying your bank. Who do you trust? And believe me, the rules are much more strict when it comes to money. The only other thing I want to say about agents is that I have people say things like, oh, my neighbor she'll be my agent. We're good friends, healthcare agent. Or I have a daughter who lives in Chicago or something. The healthcare agent, unless you have enough money to, you know, have a care manager in place at the moment of an emergency, the healthcare agent is the person who may need to sit next to you for 6 hours in the emergency room, who may have to put hospice in place, caregivers in place. It's a huge job. So make sure that you first warn them that you're naming them as agent, and then have a plan put in place.
So I think what I would want you guys to know is, you know, why do it? You're already dealing with something that's very complicated, very chronic, and very long-term. And if you don't have your documents in place, the stress you're under is going to get worse. And we want you to be de-stressed. We want you to be underwhelmed. We want you to have these things ahead of time so that you're only dealing with crises that are that can be unplanned, that you couldn't, you did everything you can and then a crisis happened. So why to do it is it will make your life so much easier. So the 74% bar, whatever has stopped you from getting at that 100%, get those documents signed, because my guess is that's what's missing.
And isn't it true that you should occasionally review that? Because I will say I've done my estate plan and I realized that was several years ago and my situation has changed just a little bit. And so probably should be updated just to reflect my current life situation. You know, for some that might not be the case, but how often do you recommend like a review of those documents and updates, Beth?
I always say to my clients, absolutely, it's a good idea to review all your documents, but especially the healthcare power of attorney every few years. I personally always make sure that the agents, and usually there are multiple, you know, one after the other or co-agents, that their addresses and phone numbers and several phone numbers and even email addresses are in the very first paragraph of the healthcare power of attorney. That information changes from time to time, but it's hugely helpful when, you know, I have, you know, run into an emergency room holding a piece of paper that the doctors can immediately contact agents. If it's just the name, it's not going to be enough. But yeah, addresses change, phone numbers change. I will say one other thing. I also give, when people sign healthcare powers of attorney in my office, I give them 5 hard copies. I email them a PDF, but I also give them 5 hard copies to give to their doctors, their agents, and to put in their glove compartment. And I can't tell you how many people come back, you know, several years later, and those 5 copies are still in the envelope. So healthcare powers of attorney, you need to blizzard the world with that document.
That's right. And the other thought I would add to that, just because I've had this happen, is I've had people have healthcare agents who are older than them, or healthcare agents that are the same age. So check and see how old the person is, because they need to be younger than you, because they need to survive you, and they need to have the stamina and the energy and the forethought and the time to do the work that needs to be done when the time comes. So think it all the way through.
So we're getting a few questions. Judy wants to know, decision maker, healthcare POA, healthcare agent, is that all the same person or is just different words describing the same job?
And I'll take that. The same person can hold all those roles, but I have many, many, many clients who say, my son is, you know, the perfect one to pay the bills and do the checks. My daughter is a nurse, or my daughter is the one, or the person who lives in town with me. You know, it's fine to divide them up, and tough if people's feelings get hurt. You know, you need to make a decision as to who's going to be there. You don't want to name your procrastinating friend or child who just takes forever to get around to things, to take care of things in an emergency.
Right.
So you have to know your kids, and you also have to, your
Right.
friends and children, and to have conversations with them.
I think the question too is, it's the same healthcare decision maker. Some people call it medical power of attorney. Some people call it healthcare surrogate. Some people, it's all the same thing. It's all different names for being the healthcare decision maker. Is that correct?
Well, you know what? Again, it's a little bit different state to state. To me, the power of attorney is the document. The agent is the human being who is, or the, you know, fiduciary or whoever, who is the decision, named as the decision maker. But you know what? It is basically all the same thing. But sometimes people name different things for different things. I do want to say, in Arizona, a surrogate is different from an agent. I don't know how many other states do this, but in Arizona, a healthcare provider can choose a surrogate. If a neighbor brings someone in to the emergency room and a decision has to be made right away as to whether or not to operate, and the neighbor says, this person has no family, the healthcare provider can actually say to the neighbor, you are now the decision maker. But it's in a very limited role. I know it's scary, very limited role. It's not what any of us would prefer. It's much better for the person, you know, the patient to have already done those documents.
All right, we're getting several questions that I want to get to. One is, what if you don't have children or anyone close that you can trust to ask to be your agent? What do you do? And another person asked, can an attorney act as that person? And what does one do when your friends are your age or older, or you have no one to fill the role? So they're both asking similar questions from a different perspective.
So I'll take the one about, you don't have anybody in your world that can trust. It is an epidemic in this country where they're called elder orphans. They don't have anybody. They don't know anybody. So it's really, and the numbers are climbing. There is a profession called care management in the website. I'll put it in the chat box. Contact a care manager to ask if that care manager could serve as your healthcare decision maker. Sometimes in some states, and I'm glad that Beth mentioned making sure you know your state rules, a guardian also serves as a healthcare decision maker or a power of attorney. So check and see if the guardians, you have to pay a care manager or a guardian, but these are options if you don't have anybody where you can find someone to take advantage and help you. So do you want to take the other?
Yeah, you know, it is a huge issue. It really is. And I would like to say that there are people out there. There are often groups, associations, people who belong to a chess club. They sometimes name each other, you know, people you can count on, but it's a huge issue. And especially for the smaller percent who haven't even thought about this. I will say this, typically a guardian is someone who's appointed by the county or by the state to serve as the decision maker, but that's a court proceeding that's expensive. And when people don't have anybody, then the court can certainly appoint a licensed fiduciary or care manager to act in that capacity. But you know, it's for people who have no money, that's an issue. And then it's going to be probably the public fiduciary or some other, you know, resource in the community. It's really a problem. And many people are isolated and it's an issue. With regard to the attorney, people would love to name their people say this all the time. Can my doctor be my agent? Can you, my attorney, can you be my agent? I have served in that capacity for probably half a dozen people. And I would say I've lost probably 30% of my retirement just because when you're a healthcare agent and there's an emergency, everything goes out the window. You are dealing with this 20 hours a week. And sometimes, you know, for months or years, I've done it for a few friends, but it's a lot to ask of someone. Now, again, I hate to turn this into a thing. If the decision maker is the agent for someone who has some money, then the decision maker can delegate. So the attorney or the person living out of state or whatever can, yes, put a care manager or put someone in place who can take care of things. But no, most attorneys will not do this for most of their clients.
Right.
So we're getting a lot of questions that it makes me think that we should move to the next part, which is the what. What is it that people should be planning? So I'd like to start off first with Beth, because we're getting a lot of questions about the different types of documents, the difference between financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. So from an estate planning perspective and an advanced directives perspective, could you give us just a brief overview of the different types of things that people should consider putting into place? And then when we're done with that, I'm going to go to Amy to talk about some other aspects of planning that's not related specifically to those documents.
Okay. Well, A healthcare power of attorney stand just by itself is a document that names an agent or one or more agents to stand in the shoes of the principal, the person signing the document. And it gives that person the authority to make all healthcare decisions, including hiring and firing healthcare providers, getting access to records, and you know, all the it also serves as a HIPAA release, a privacy release, so that they can get, you know, records, they can make decisions. Usually there's end of life language built in, or a living will built in. A living will standalone, as I said before, is just your personal declaration. If I am terminal, comatose, irreversibly brain damaged, etc., I do not want to be kept alive on machines. So a healthcare power of attorney may include that language, or have the living will attached to it. There are also mental health care powers of attorney. And interestingly, it used to be that we thought of this as something that only if you had a diagnosed mental illness would it be needed. But we find that people who have early dementia very often have some psychotic episodes, hyperanxiety, you know, advanced sundowning, that kind of thing. And they may need an inpatient, you know, treatment situation for, usually it's just a couple of weeks while the meds are adjusted and stuff. So I find that I'm doing mental health, I include mental health power of attorney language in the advanced directives. I also want to say that advanced directives are very easy to find online. You need to know in your state what's a valid method of execution. In my state, the signature has to be witnessed or notarized. But anyway, it's not hard. Other documents are harder, but with health advanced directives, you can usually find good state-specific powers of attorney. Financial powers of attorney are strictly for your finances, and you can either do a general durable power of attorney that names a trusted person to pay your bills and manage your affairs. You know, or you can do specific ones. You can go to your bank and sign their power of attorney, for instance, just for your checking account or for specific accounts. There are springing powers of attorney that only take effect if you are incapacitated. Most attorneys don't like those because it takes weeks sometimes to get a note from a doctor, or months to get a note from a doctor saying this person can't handle their affairs. If you trust the person, just sign a document saying you trust them, and then they will wait for the time for that to be, you know, effective.
And Beth, we had a question, and there's been actually a couple that's come through that's similar. So, you know, when someone is executing these documents for themselves and for their loved one, they have to be obviously competent enough to understand what they're signing and all that. So if it's recommended they regularly review and see if there's any changes, how do you manage that? Does that mean that like whatever was written at the time is stuck, like they can't make any changes? How do you deal with anything if your loved one then becomes incapacitated or what would be considered incompetent because they have dementia?
Okay, I think I'm understanding that the powers of attorney are usually called durable powers of attorney, which means, and this didn't used to be the case years ago, but it means they're still good even when the person becomes incapacitated for whatever reason. You know, it's very difficult. Sometimes people are way past the point of understanding the documents when they sign them. And, you know, that's problematic. Attorneys, most of us are trained to, you know, interview people in such a way that we get a good sense of whether or not people have capacity. I have absolutely done estate planning documents for people with Alzheimer's and with Lewy body disease and others who were still able to understand what they were signing, but it is difficult. But yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm capturing the question, but once people come incapacitated, powers of attorney usually cannot be revoked by that person. Powers of attorney are revocable generally. You can amend them or change them whenever you want. Most power of attorney language says once the person becomes incapacitated, they cannot be amended or revoked.
Right. And I would add to that, and I've seen those same things that you're describing. Sometimes if there's fighting family members and somebody wants to change their power of attorney, care managers have been hired to conduct a status assessment, a capacity assessment, or secure an assessment to determine whether the person has the ability to change their documents. So it doesn't happen always, but we've been called upon to serve in that capacity to help the attorneys protect themselves and their client.
And you bring up a really good point, Amy. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on is when you have multiple family members and you don't have these documents in place, the problems that it can cause in making a good decision for the person that's, you know, maybe in the hospital and needs somebody to make a final decision on what to do. So can we talk about why this can eliminate some of that stress? You touched on it, like, you know, worry about, you know, who it might upset, but can we talk a little bit about why this can alleviate stress later if you just make that decision now and maybe even salvage relationships potentially, because it can get really tense with family members when you have one child that may want to do everything to save mom and the other child says, but I know that's not what she wanted, but we didn't have a document either designating somebody to make that decision and or a living will if it's the case where they are in a terminal state or, you know, vegetative state. So can we touch on that just a little bit?
Well, one strategy that I like to see families use, and it happens, you know, enough that you want to talk about it, is use an outside third party as the bad cop. Like you're a mom, you're a dad, you don't want to hurt your kids' feelings, but you know, my attorney recommended that I do it this way. The feedback that I got from my care manager, I talked things over with my doctor and I talked things over with my therapist, and include a third party in there to support making these tough decisions. I now have a client whose father has Parkinson's and they have 2 boys. The one boy can't handle money, so the mom gave him decision-making over healthcare. The other gentleman's really good with money, isn't good at healthcare, and gave him the financial. Now, those were very appropriate decisions, but both sons are upset. But they did it ahead of time and they used me as the bad cop. And so they're getting through the discomfort now. So when they have to act in that capacity, they've already processed all of this discomfort. So it's not going to complicate the decision-making as much as if they hadn't dealt with it on the front end.
And I just want to add to that, that the last thing you want is for all this to end up in court. And that should be part of the conversation with the agents. We had a judge years ago who I was able to advise my clients, if our judge who does this area of law sees all these family members bickering, he's going to throw all of you out and appoint a professional fiduciary to take care of this. And there goes your inheritance. And not that I put it that bluntly, but really it's like part of the conversation has to be, this is not third grade anymore. Everyone has to act like a grown-up and do what mom says or do, you know, whatever, because the alternative is to go in front of a judge who's heard 1,000 of these cases and is up to here with this kind of family squabbling. So,
Right. And then, you know, Beth alluded to this earlier, but there are state to state rules around powers of attorney. And we had this situation, there's a question in the question box, and I'll say something about it and then defer over to you, Beth, where a durable power of attorney was signed, the person was alert, had, you know, capacity, and a week later they tried to use the power of attorney, and the medical provider, the doctor asked them to have a proof of competency at the time the DPOA was signed.
Oh God.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I guess they want to know, is that normal?
No, it's not really normal. And what I do is I sick the lawyer on them. That's what I do. If somebody gives me a problem with my client at a bank or a medical provider or a doctor's office, I call the lawyer and I say, listen, go make bad lawyer to this person because what they're doing is wrong. And I scare them with the lawyer. And there are medical providers out there that are not informed properly with these documents. So that's not a normal occurrence to the T. Christopher Crandall. Not normal.
And most attorneys will put their names, you know, in a little
Right.
corner of the document somewhere. Their names and phone numbers and everything else are going to be there. And yeah, it's not really, you know, doctors always have the option of going to their administrators or saying, I'm not going to do this without a court order. I'll tell you, more and more banks are uncomfortable with powers of attorney and they're asking for court orders, you know, meaning the court makes a finding of incapacity. It's easier for the bank, but again, that's thousands of dollars that shouldn't have to be spent. But I will say again, and I think this is true of every state and every judge, they put huge weight on the person's wishes. Yeah, not if it was done 5 minutes, you know, in the middle of an emergency, but if someone has made these decisions, the court will do everything it can to honor those decisions and appoint as guardian or conservator the person who was named. Unless for some reason it's inappropriate, that's what they give great weight to, is what the patient wanted.
Right. And so the documents, as stated earlier, that you need is the durable power of attorney for finances. And then you need a healthcare decision maker, whether that's a healthcare surrogate, medical power of attorney, and you need a living will. Those are the 3 advanced directives that you need. And then the other common question I get or statement that I get from clients is when I ask them if they're a do not resuscitate, if they're a DNR. And I hear this 50% of the time, they'll say, oh yeah, I got all my papers drawn up by my attorney. As if the attorney is authorized to do a do not resuscitate. So just for your information, a DNR is a doctor's order that you not be resuscitated if your heart stops or you stop breathing. It is not a legal document, it's a medical physician's order. So those are the documents that you need. The other document that I like people to do, and it's not a legal document, but it's a letter to the family, or it's a video to the family. And it touches on all the things that aren't covered by that legal document, that are outside of the living will, that are if I have severe dementia and they want to put a pacemaker in, or if they do a swallow study and they want to put a feeding tube, or if I'm on hospice and they want to give me an antibiotic and it's going to make my life prolong. Tell them the story or your vision of how you want to be cared for. If I want to be at home, if I'm okay being in a nursing home, do I want a door outside? Do I want access to dogs? Do I want to water plants? Do I want to bring in my own furniture? Tell the story of who you are and your vision of how you see the last few years of your life living out. By video is extremely powerful, to watch a video of a person talking to their family and telling them who they are. I know for myself that people that know me in my world, I'm going to want rescue dogs to love on me. I'm going to want to be able to walk outside. I'm going to want to be able to see water. I'm going to want to be taken to the beach, a couple times a week. Those are the things that are really important to me. And then, do you want to be kept out of the hospital? In your state, there might be ways for you to have the physician write an order, pulsed order, physician order for life-sustaining treatment, whether you want those. Not in Florida, we don't have that. So the only way that you could be kept out of the hospital is if you're on hospice. So all the things that aren't covered in obvious medical documents, talk about those things and how you want to be cared for, and put it in writing and put it in with your legal documents. There's something also about a letter with your own signature on that you can feel the weight and the importance of all the decisions that you're going to be making, and take the time to do that. And I did mention the POLST form. So thank you to Helen about mentioning the POLST form, Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's valid in some states, not in others. So find out in your own state where it's valid. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that we covered all the non-legal things to think about also.
Well, and I would love it, Amy, if you could go into some things that people should consider in terms of planning now, why they have choices for the future, you know, related to how they want to age, whether they have Parkinson's or not. How about, you know, aging in place and, you know, making decisions who they would have as a support system, maybe not legally, like in the documents, but, you know, who would they call if they just needed somebody to come over and change a light bulb so they don't risk, you know, getting up on something and falling and breaking a hip? Or, you
Right.
know, who would they call if they got really sick and they were, you know, needing somebody to fix food for them or go grocery shopping? So can you talk about some of the practical things that people should consider that maybe they haven't?
Yeah, I think the statistics are now 80% of people want to stay in their own home and die in their own home. I think that's a very valid statistic. And I'm a very practical person and I've been around a long time, and this all relates to how you're going to pay for it. So I do like people to think about paying for care at home, and whether your state provides help in the way of Medicaid benefits to care at home. Most of them do not. They're not generous. New York City is probably the only place that you can get 24-hour care paid easily in your home. Every other state is a little problematic. But how are you going to pay for it? And the care needs are most expensive when you need assisted type of care. You know, an assisted care at home, I define as 10 to 12 hours of care a day. Once you need more than 12 hours of care a day, you typically need 24-hour care, which is then indicated in the nursing home. In the nursing home world, it's easier to get the state to pay the balance of the benefits. It's harder to get that care paid for at home, in assisted living at home. And that's a 3 to 5 year expenditure. And the other piece of advice is most people have saved for retirement, or the ones that have saved for retirement don't want to start spending the money. You just don't want to start spending it. You're afraid of running out of money before you die. It's going to happen to all of us. So you got to get really comfortable with spending the money in that sweet spot of needing assisted care at home during what I happen to call the fragile years. You know, you're slower, you aren't thinking as quickly, your mind's telling you something that your body can't keep up with. And then so some specific pieces of advice. See if your area has a neighbors network or a village network or a membership network that you can call on to get that help with changing a light bulb or getting a ride to mass or joining your Shabbat dinner at the temple. Getting your groceries delivered. Maybe you hire a care manager to help get you set up on automated delivery of your diapers, home delivery of it. Where can you get an in-home doctor? Where is daycare affordable? What daycares are more sophisticated than others? Those are the practical pieces of advice to stay at home, which is what people want. You need to take the money into consideration and then find out what your community resources. I know here in Orlando, we have a really great brain fitness program, a cognitive fitness program that both Parkinson's and Alzheimer's clients use. And it's 4 days a week and it's 9 to 2. And it's a great resource and helps people stay at home longer, get out, stay socially engaged. So think about those things that, you know, I've said this, Beth, once you get to the nursing home, the planning's pretty easy. You can either get, you know, protect your assets or you can't, or halfway there. Nursing home care is probably the easier financial formula. It's in-home care that is more expensive and not easily funded by the state.
Right. And I would just like to add to this. First of all, staying in your own home, Amy and I have both seen dozens, if not hundreds of examples of what can happen to a home when someone's staying at it who's not capable of maintaining it. You know, yes, we would love to stay with the familiar, but man, sometimes things really deteriorate. A lot of this is the fear of the unknown. And if you're able, you know, adult care homes and assisted living and everything else, if you go and visit, visitors are welcome. They are not going to pat you on the head and hold you hostage and say, you walked in our door, now we get you. Just while you're still able to live at home, visit hospice, visit care facilities, visit, and just get a feel for it's stable. People are fed, people are cared for. Some are better than others, but it's really a good idea to familiarize yourself. Yes, staying at home is and having 24/7 care or even part-time care often is much more expensive than assisted living. Most people cannot, and this is what Amy said, you cannot necessarily live within your income if you need care. It's fine to spend down the money that you saved for a rainy day. I want to add one little thing going back to the orange card, the do not resuscitate order. Just to clarify, a living will says if I'm comatose, if I'm vegetative, if I'm irreversibly brain damaged, then I do not want extraordinary measures. The orange card or the do not resuscitate form says I'm already there. I have already been resuscitated. I'm already terminal. I already have this stuff wrong with me. And this is going to sound terrible, but what I say to people is, imagine this: you have your orange card, buttoned to your lapel of your shirt, and if you collapse at Walmart, legally they're supposed to sweep you up at the end of the day with the gum wrappers. This is the signal to paramedics and third parties saying, I do not want, any kind of care as of right now. And it's a very important difference. And that's why a doctor needs to be, participating in this to confirm that, yes, you do. It's appropriate for you not to want intervention.
Right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I would also, getting to a question that was in the sidebar here, I did not mean to skip over assisted living and memory care.
No, I was going to actually have you go into some of that next.
Yeah. I saw that. Absolutely not. And I've seen people where the spouse says, oh no, my spouse will never move into a community. They wouldn't like it. And they move in and it's fabulous.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you. And once you, sometimes, and really, when someone has a memory impairment or needs that supersede one person, they need more people to absorb their care needs and their mental needs and their emotional needs and social needs. We're all, those of you who are married, you can't meet your spouse, all of your spouse's needs. And if you think you can, you're just in a different framework than I am. I think that we all need something different, and sometimes it's good to step away and come back in. And the same holds true when you have a medical problem or a memory problem. You do need to draw on the support of others. And there are a lot of good assisted living communities in the country, memory care communities in the country. The one caveat that I would want you to be sure you shop for is assisted living industry is not a medical-based community. Most of them do not have registered nurses on staff 16 or 24 hours a day. So if you go in with the expectation that you will get medical care, it's a social model, not a medical model. So you will have some work to do. If your loved one has medical needs, you'll have to be managing the medical appointments and making sure that the signs and symptoms of their illness that you see, that you make sure they get to the doctor, because RN supervision is not a strong point in the assisted living market. But it's a wonderful add-on. And it actually can improve the quality of your relationship by having their care needs met by someone else. And then you can come in and just be the wife or the daughter or the friend. And it preserves the quality of your relationship by pulling on that source.
And Amy, don't you find that caregivers get sick? Yeah. I do. That the caregiving spouse or the caregiving child, they get tachycardia or cancer or the things just from the stress of caregiving.
Oh yeah, you see them drop, and you tell them, and you can see the fatigue is stopping the absorption of the solid information. I'll say, you're going to end up in the hospital. You're going to end up on the floor. You're going to be the one. And pride and inability to accept help is really the determining factor in terms of how much of a quality of life you'll have with your partner. The hardest thing to do is accept help for all of us, I think. But once you do, and you feel that relief that you're not having to carry the load alone, and you see the quality of your reactions to your loved one is better. You're not so short-tempered. You're not so, exhausted. You're not so quick to hurry up and get them ready so you can escape and get some downtime. It will improve the quality of your life once you make that decision that you're going to say yes to help.
And someone asked about, funding these things. So memory care, especially assisted living, is very expensive. So is there anything that if somebody didn't really have a lot of savings, or maybe ended up exhausting funds, they can do to help with that? I know you mentioned it kind of before, that there's some state funding. Is there a way, and it's kind of, I'm adding to the question, is there a way maybe ahead of time to protect some assets so that the community dwelling spouse still has some funds more than might be typically allowed by Medicaid? So I guess that's a kind of a two-folded question. But that is something I know a lot of people are concerned about, is first, how do I even afford this kind of
So
care?
I'll take one little section and then I'll throw it to you with the preservation of assets. The only secret pot of money that I know of is a veteran's benefit to help pay for care if you don't have anything. If you're a wartime veteran or a surviving spouse of a wartime veteran, this is not the time and place to talk about it. This is probably a session all in its own. Is the only secret pot of money if you have no money. And then I'll turn it over to Beth for the preservation of assets.
And I just want to say, every community is covered by an area council on aging. And it's created by the government in '93. These are not government agencies, but they are tremendous sources of information for things like veterans benefit. Of course, the VA is a great source of information about veterans benefits, but the the VA does not pay for veterans care except in very specific circumstances, but it does need to be checked out. Preservation of assets, that was definitely something that was easier to do 10 or 15 years ago. The government really tightened up on it. Every state is different. There is Medicaid, which is a family program, a federal program governing need-based benefits. There are basic rules set by the federal government, but every state is different. I will say that in Arizona, people can qualify for state assistance, but they have to be more than poor, and they have to have more than a diagnosis. They have to be incapable of handling their activities of daily living. It's a very high bar to pass. So you can't just say, well, I'm just going to spend down my money and then the state will pick it up. That may not be possible. And again, it's so much better to educate yourself beforehand about what your state does. And again, area council on aging or neighborhood communities, Parkinson's Association and many organizations do provide information about this. And of course, elder law attorneys are the best able. Florida's a terrible state with regard to a lot of asset protection, so I will throw that out. But many states, there are ways to protect some assets, and I'm just going to say it's a balance between taxpayers. Taxpayers, they don't want someone to give all their money to their kids and show up the next day at the hospital, the nursing home or whatever, and say, I'm poor, pay for my care. So the taxpayer's interests have to be weighed, but there are some ways. It takes a few years of planning to protect some assets. Trusts do not protect assets. I'll say that right off the bat. A trust will not protect assets. It just won't. And it just takes some planning, and there are definitely resources in every community that you can investigate before a crisis happens.
Right.
And someone asked about long-term care insurance, because we haven't really touched on that. That's only helpful if you had planned ahead and purchased it, but it can certainly help pay for in-home care, assisted living care.
What I would say is, if you've been smart enough to buy it or wealthy enough to buy it and you have it, get help when you file your first claim, because the long-term care insurance companies do not like to have to pay out. Right. So don't go in alone, go in educated and informed to make sure that that first claim you put in gets covered and not denied. I've been hired too many times to fight a denied claim that should not have been denied. So those of you who've got long-term care insurance, every policy is different. That might be a session in and of itself, but if you've got it, God bless you.
I will say this, my father had a fabulous long-term care policy that he got back in the 80s. I didn't even know they had them. And so when he ended up in a nursing home with Alzheimer's, he got great coverage. I finally broke down and started, I put together a policy a couple of years ago. And I will say the policy I have, it's pretty good. It's $400 a month. When I go into retirement, that's going to be a big bite, but it's a hybrid policy, meaning it's a combined life insurance policy. And, so the money I put in, if I don't need long-term care, can be used as life insurance. So there are a lot of options. I think it's a great idea if you have assets to protect, but it's a bite. It's a bite out of your income.
So I know someone wanted you to repeat the 3 necessary documents one last time, if you would do that. And then I want to just kind of round this up or sum this up with, the 2 key players that can really help people, in their planning and or when they would happen to get in a crisis and they hadn't planned, are 2 professionals that are here on this program today. Having a care manager can help you with your planning, but it can also help you if you didn't make a plan and you end up in a crisis. And certainly an elder law attorney can do the same from a different perspective. So it's great hearing, your insights and such wisdom. If you would just recap the 3 necessary documents someone had asked, and then we're going to get ready to go into our breakout session.
Okay, for me?
Yep.
Yeah. Healthcare power of attorney. And then again, they can be combined into one document, but definitely healthcare power of attorney, naming and authorizing an agent to take care of your healthcare decisions, a living will that expresses your wish or to be kept alive or not to be kept alive under certain circumstances, a financial power of attorney, also called a general durable power of attorney, that authorize a trusted person to manage your assets, pay your bills, if you're not able to.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth. And, in the handouts, again, if you've got the handouts, there's a list of where to go. The Aging Life Care Association website's on there, elder care locator, where to find a financial advisor, where to find a elder law attorney. All those resources are on that. If you didn't get the handout, there was going to be a follow-up email with those attached. So you'll have access to that. We are going to now do a breakout session. So what we would like you to do is, in your group, we would like for you to talk about All right, where are you? What plans have you made? What have you not made? What do you know you need to do? And what's been your barriers? What are fears or frustrations or challenges that you've had to keep you from moving forward, knowing that you probably need to do it, but you just haven't? So that's the discussion that we would like you to spend a few minutes reviewing with one another. And then we're going to come back. We'll just randomly pick a couple of people to maybe share some of what they thought in their last 15 minutes. And then the next session, we're actually going to be taking this conversation further into how to ask for help. So I think Amy was the one that referenced the number of people that are so stressed out that they're passing out before, not passing out, or passing away even before their loved one. And the fact that people just have a hard time asking for help. So we're going to actually be addressing that in the next session. So I think Kelly is getting ready to launch us into groups. So you don't need to do anything. You will immediately be put into your little breakout room. And then when the time is up, you will immediately be returned back to the main session. So if you just hold on for the ride, it'll all be taken care of for you. So again, the question is, what have you done or not done in terms of your planning, and what have been your challenges? All right, I think we're going to get ready to take off. And I think you just asked to be joining a group, just say join.
It's locked up in the wrong places. That's right. That's amazing. I'll have to look that up.
No.
All right, I think we're starting to have folks rejoin us again. I don't know that all of the rooms have returned to us, but I see a few people have come back to us. We'll give them a couple more seconds.
I've been admiring all your technological savvy here in this.
It's not mine. I have staff that knows this much better than me, and I'm very grateful for it. 15 seconds, and we'll be all back together.
Mm-hmm. Question.
There was some technical problems in one of the groups. So, and we've done breakouts before in smaller groups. I don't know that we've ever had such a large amount of people and go into breakout rooms. So there's always that opportunity for technical issue when you're dealing with a larger group. But I think for the most part, everybody got where they were supposed to go. So.
Mm-hmm. Is there board certification for planners?
I didn't.
The analog of medical boards?
You say that again?
What is the professional recognition for estate planners of this topic? The analogy to medical board members, except for lawyers who specialize, or financial experts who specialize in this area. Is there a certifying body for the professionals?
Oh, for attorneys, Beth.
Well, there are, yeah, attorneys can specialize by taking board examinations, and yeah, there is an elder law specialist component. Those people have to pass tests that show they know the entire breadth and scope of elder law. And they generally, yeah, you should, I think Florida has quite a few specialists in the legal area. Many attorneys don't want to bother with the tests, but you know, every attorney has to take 15 hours of continuing law education, and there are many seminars that all of us. I'm not board certified, but you know, most of us take a lot of seminars and training and practice, so we learn these areas of law pretty thoroughly.
Hey, Beth, when you live in 2 states, do you need power of attorney in each state?
That's a really good question. We have a lot of snowbirds. I'm sure they do in many states. We have a lot of snowbirds. And what I tell people is if the powers of attorney of both states name the exact same people, you know, although theoretically, legally, the more recent power of attorney revokes the earlier one, I tell people do not throw away you know, the powers of attorney from the other state. It really does boil down to what the healthcare provider is going to accept. But as long as they say the same thing, I don't see the harm in keeping both.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for your patience. Going into the chat rooms, it was kind of the first time we've done one in a live stream program of this size. So we hope you got in there okay and was able to have a conversation around our subject of, you know, what have you planned, and what have been your challenges? So if anyone's willing to share what they discussed in their group, I'm really interested in hearing some of the challenges or barriers people have faced. Maybe those are, you know, fears or just getting the motivation to do it or not knowing where to turn. So is anyone willing to share what they discussed in their group?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, this is Dennis. Yeah, we had a very interesting discussion about the different types of power of attorney. It was my understanding that power of attorney, the person has the authority to make these decisions, not as to whether or not, you know, medical or financial. But maybe once again, that might be by state. We're in North Carolina, and we moved here, and we had to get our will and other things updated. And we went to an attorney who specialized with seniors, and this person really did everything for us about 5 years ago. And so I'll have to go and check and see now. But my understanding was we have just the one power of attorney. It doesn't specifically say that lawyer, that person that we assign, who actually is our son, you know, he can make decisions about this, but not about that. It didn't say that. So we talked about the different types of power of attorney.
Awesome.
Is that, excuse me, I guess my question is that unique to the state? We're in North Carolina. Is that something that you go by? Each state could possibly be different?
I'm just going to say that I haven't seen that. I think it's legally possible to do it that way. It's just that you're dealing with completely different third parties. So I don't know that I would want my banker to know all my personal wishes about end of life and stuff. I'm not sure if I want my healthcare provider to know who's in charge of my money. So virtually always, they're two separate documents, but North Carolina may have a combined document that works. And also, you know, sometimes you have different people serving in that capacity. So you might check your stuff or talk to your attorney. Legally, I don't see a problem with it. It's just not as efficient.
Yeah, we're going to have it reviewed. You commented, you recommended having it reviewed every few years, and our few years is up. So we're going to do that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Is there anyone else that was in a group that had a good discussion they would like to share what they talked about? Any challenges that they're struggling with to get started? All right, Nancy, I think Nancy raised her hand.
Hi, yeah, we had a group of 5 from all over the United States. Each one of us obviously in a care partner role with a person with Parkinson's. One person, well, I take that back. One person is flying solo, which means they are an individual with Parkinson's and in charge of their care. Their family lives on the other side of the United States. But everybody at a different stage and a different place in terms of the planning and organizing. And I would say if any of them want to jump in, to go ahead and participate in talking. I don't want to talk for everybody. I personally have been a care partner, a caregiver for 3 different people over the past just about 20 years. And so got it down at this point pretty smoothly. But one thing I will share with you, got all the forms, all the legal documents, indefinite long-term care. and this is pertains to my husband. When he was diagnosed with Parkinson's dementia, we made the decision to become a blended family. So my daughter, who's a nurse, her husband, 2 boys, and slew of pets all live with us in our original home. And we had a pulse, and based on my husband's request, it was to resuscitate. A couple of years ago, during a hospitalization, he went asystole, meaning his heart stopped for about 12 seconds and then restarted. And not long ago, my daughter said to me, "Hey, Mom, are you sure you still want him resuscitated?" And I said, "Talk to me." She does teach code at the hospital, and she said, "Probably I would be the one to, if he coded, to be doing CPR." And she said, "You understand, we do not do mouth to mouth. It is compressions 1.5 to 2 inches deep. We break sternums, we break lungs, or break ribs, we puncture lungs. Is that what you want for Dad at this point?" Who happens to have osteoporosis, by the way. And I share that. And so I said, no. So we changed it. And I share that with you because I think, as we all know, Parkinson's progresses. And I think our decisions about end of life may do that as well as we move through the Parkinson's with them. I just share that with you to keep that in mind. It wasn't anything at the time I thought, oh yeah, I got all those forms taken care of. But when she happened to look at the pulse and said, "Hey," and I went, "Oh, yeah, okay. And so we got that changed.
That's a very brave thing to share, and it's a very gut-wrenching thing to hear. And yeah, that is really hard to hear, but I will validate what your daughter said to you. It is what happens, and it rarely works. It doesn't bring them back.
Right.
So it's pretty traumatic on all parties.
Most physicians, if they are asked, and I've grown up in a medical family, will say, "No, I do not want to be given CPR."
Yep.
Also, stats right now are that 63% of us as caregivers will pass before the person we are caring for. Just FYI. With John, when he was diagnosed with dementia, Parkinson's dementia, we had a lengthy conversation, and I said, "Under what circumstance, do you not want me to save you?" I said, "If you had a heart attack, do you want me to save you?" And he goes, "Yes." "Why?" "I have really good quality of life." I said, "Okay, great." And this is a man who's completely immobile, who now is almost completely nonverbal, but extremely active still. So he just has a love of life, and I want to honor that. I said to him, "Under what circumstance would you not want me to save you?" And he goes, "Well, if I had pain that was so great that it couldn't be controlled with medication." I said, "John, you've broken your back 7 times and not once did you know it. That doesn't count." And so he finally said, "Nan, when I can no longer give or receive hugs, let me go." And that guided us. And then my daughter's input helped clarify next steps. And so again, it's a process, both in terms of the reality of the person for whom you're caring, and also you're accepting that reality.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to just ask this, and I totally support what you did. My experience is kind with many of my clients and friends is that they're all for, death with dignity and I don't want this, I don't want that, until they're actually at the end stages. And if they are not on hospice, they tend to opt for all these extra procedures that prolong their lives, even though their documents say something different. So counterbalanced with what you're saying is, what does the agent do when the document says, "I don't want to be kept alive if my quality of life is terrible," and then the patient himself or herself keeps making decisions that prolong their lives? So
I would say in our case, you mentioned hospice. My husband's on Duopa therapy. In the state of California, if he goes on hospice, Duopa therapy stops because hospice is required to be the provider to pay, and they won't. So we've made it very clear, we're not going to go on hospice. John will stay on Duopa therapy. I've seen people where they go on hospice and they stop their Parkinson's meds. I'm sorry, that's cruel and inhumane punishment as far as I'm concerned.
I would find a different hospice, by the way. I would,
Right.
anyway.
This was in a
That's
care
right.
facility where I was running a support group, and the participant's family, son and daughter, had made the decision to tell hospice to pull him off. And I had trained the nursing staff at the facility on Parkinson's and Parkinson's medication and the importance of timing and whatnot. And they said, Nancy, it's out of our hands. We have to follow what hospice is saying. So I said to the person with Parkinson's, is this what you want? He couldn't talk at that point. He shook his head no. And the wife asked me to call hospice, but before that interchange occurred, he passed away. But certainly stopping your Parkinson's meds is not necessary. Again?
Well, these are really like important conversations to have, as difficult as they are. And that is a heart-wrenching, both of those stories you just shared are heart-wrenching, but they help us to understand why we need to have these conversations ongoing with our loved ones, and address them as things change, so that, you know, like Beth was saying, she's had people say, I don't want life-sustaining treatments, and then yet they're making the decisions. And so just having these ongoing conversations, and just start thinking, for all of those of you today that haven't done planning up to this point, I hope that today's session kind of gave you some motivation to start those wheels in motion, so that you can at least reach out to those people that can help you with planning, an elder law attorney, a care manager. We've given you some resources. Again, the handout has several resources that will help you find an elder law attorney or a care manager. If you didn't get them, I'll say one more time, there'll be a follow-up email with those documents attached, and that will at least help you start the conversation with your loved one and start the process. We're just about out of time. I want to thank Amy and Beth for joining us today, for their expertise, which is amazing. We could probably keep you for another hour, and just sharing all that with us. I thank everyone for joining us too, because this is a very important conversation, and it's just one of several that we're going to have. So the next one, we're going to be talking about asking for help, especially for care partners. There's a high percentage of people that aren't asking for help because of guilt. And we want to talk about some of those barriers to that in our next session. So hope you will join us for the next one. If everyone would just give a wave of gratitude to Beth and Amy for joining us today. And thanks to Karen for being a part of this, and having this study that's given us such great information and insight into our care partners. We're so thankful. It is recorded, so you can share it and refer back to it. And until the next time, we will see you again. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, ladies.
Thank
Bye.
you.